Bez Hashem Yisboch, we begin Daf Mem Dal Mesechta Yevamos. We begin on the bottom of Megillah Beis, 5 lines up in the bottom of the Yomid. We will continue with the halacha, the next Mishnah, continuing the theme of the previous Mishnah regarding qualifying the mitzvah of Yibum as it applies to the Gadol, and regarding who do we say gets the rights and what type of Yibum, which that relates to some of the ideas that are going to be brought up in today's Daf regarding the well-known halacha that Yibum is only for one of the tzaras, one of the wives, not for all of them, including that of chalitza, and the source for that, including the halacha, the next Mishnah regarding the status of the chalutza. How do we qualify that prohibition of chalutza? Is it rabbinic or is it biblical? And on Amid Beis, the Gemara discusses regarding, can we learn that from a kabel chamer, from almana, regarding other women, regarding the children that are from that type of a unit. So we begin the current daf, Mem Gimel Beis, 5 lines up at the bottom of the Yom. Says the Mishnah, Arba Achen, Nesuin Arba Nashim. We like that, Arba Achen, we've had that, a parak, call that 4 brothers married to 4 women. Umesu, and all these brothers died. So there's 4 Yevamos in this family. If the older brother, which we said he's the one that is ideally the one who's going to do Yibum. So if the older brother wants to do Yibum to all 4 of these Shemeres Yavams, Hershus Biyodeh, that he has that option to do it. Another case, if someone was married to 2 women and he died, a critical halacha in this Masechta, the bia or chalitza of any one of those women is peteret sarasa. It releases the co-wife, and you don't have to do anything with her. She automatically is done. You only need to do to one of them. Now, says the Mishnah, if one of these women were kosher to marry a kohen, and one was already invalid, for example, let's say she was already had a divorce once before in their marriage, in her life, and then she married this person who died without any children. So if this person, this Yavim, is going to do chalitza, then chalitza l'basula. Then they should do chalitza to the one that's the gerusha, and not disqualify the one who never was divorced to kahuna by doing chalitza to her, which makes her forbidden to a kohen. Because if a person doesn't need the water in his pit, where here he doesn't need her anyway, so he could release whichever one he wants to, but others need it because a kohen is limited to women that are not divorcees. So even though he doesn't need it, one shouldn't spill it on. Therefore, he should do chalitza to the one that's possible. Now, if he was doing yibim, then miyam l'kshed, then he could do yibim even to the kosher one because he's going to be marrying her. Now, the Gemara wonders the wording of the Mishnah. Arba achen selka daitach. Do you really think that there were 4 brothers? You're saying it sounds like there was only a family of 4 brothers, and you said that mesu, that they died, so they all died. So who's doing yibum? That you're saying the oldest could do a yibum to all of them? Elamer rather says Gemara, no, arba me'achen. 4 of the brothers, they might have been 8 brothers. 4 of those brothers died, and then as the Gemara continues quoting from our Mishnah, we said that the older brother, if he wants to, he can do even to all of them. Harishus biyadeh, that he has that option. Says the Gemara, what b'shavkile? What, we let him? How is he going to provide for all these 4 new wives? But Vatanu and the Bryce and the Barm, we don't just encourage someone to do yibum if it's not appropriate. The pasuk says of a that they called to him, to the Yavam, Zikni Iri, the elders of a city. What do you mean they called to him? Hein b'lishlucha. They call and not their agents. And it says v'dibrei love, they speak to him. What are they speaking to him? Melamis comes to teach us. They give him an appropriate counsel for him. Meaning, if he was a young man and she was the Yevama was an older woman, or the other way around, who's zaken v'yilada? He was an older man and she's a younger girl. They tell him, what are you doing, my young girls? Or what are you doing, my older women? Go to that which is like yours. And don't make a dispute in your house. So you see that you give him counsel. So here, marrying 4 Yevamas definitely doesn't seem appropriate because how he can provide for them. So why are we saying that Hershus biyadeh? Says it's necessary to actually where it's possible for him, where he's wealthy, he's affluent, and he's a man of means, and he can provide for 4 new wives. So you must say, if that's the case, why picking Arba Achen and even many? Pick 10 brothers. He could take on 10 new wives. Says the Gemara, no, we're still giving him a good idea that Dalet and Tveiloi, 4 new wives and not more, because that each one could get her intimate time with him, because the intimate time of a Talmid Chacham is every Friday night. As I said, a pasuk in Tehillim that the fruits are given in its time, as the Gemara says in Subidav Samach Beis and Beis. So here, at least, he's taking on 4 wives, where each one could get 1 week. So she'll get once a month on Friday night. Therefore, we say 4, but not more than that. Yeah, look, the Mishnah said, if someone's married to 2 women, and the bia or chalitza of one of them is enough, and you don't have to do it to the other one. So the Gemara says, why? In the Amr Tavai, why can't you do Yibum to both of them? They both have the mitzvah of Yibum. So the pasuk says in the Varm that when it talks about that they're going to bring the Yevamot to him, to the eyes of the elders, and she's going to take off his shoe from his foot, and she's going to spit in front of him, and she's going to say, this is what you do to a man, asher lo yivna es beis achav, that doesn't build the house of his brother. It says in the singular, which teaches us bais echud b'ainav, because if he would be doing the mitzvah Yibum, it would only be singular. He could build one house, vein b'ainav shnei batim, he cannot build two houses from his brother's household. So you see that Yibum is only for one of them. So it's okay, but why are you saying you could do Yibum chalitza to one of them, the other one goes scot-free? You should be allowed to do chalitza to both of them. Now, Mazut Batuvia Makra says, because it says in the pasuk after that, it says Beis Chalutz Hanal, that they call out and say, this is the house of the one who the shoe was taken off. It's in the singular there too. Beis is singular. Bayis Echadu Chalitz, he only removes one house. Vein Chalutz Shnei Batim doesn't remove two houses. See, chalitza only done to one. Okay, so we say chalitza or Yibum is only done to one. But if you have two wives, and either chalitza and Yibum could only be one, so b'niyam l'chada, do Yibum to one of them first, and then b'nachas l'chada, then do chalitza to the other one, and you're only going to have one chalitza and one Yibum. So Makra, the pasuk says, no, it says, if the man doesn't want to, etc., to do Yibum, so then he does chalitza. The inference is, hachaf it's Yibum, but if he would want to, he'd be able to do Yibum, which teaches the following halachic principle. Whoever could do Yibum, then could do chalitza, because it has to be, he doesn't want to, but if he would, he would be able to. So whoever does not go up to the bezdin, which is like the terminology of the pasuk, leyibum, for yibum, where there's no zika for yibum, because the Torah exempts, because it says it's beis achiv, which is bayis echad b'ainav l'shnei batim. So if you already did yibum to the first one, so then ein oila chalitza, you cannot do chalitza to the second one, because you cannot do yibum, because it would be a second one, so then you can't do chalitza either. Moreover, says the Gemara, we don't want people to say you have a bias, miktsas ebana, miktsas echalutz. Part of it was built and part of it was removed. So the Gemara says, why? What's the problem? Let them say that. Says the Gemara, you're right. If they would do Yibum first and then chalitza, that would be okay. But maybe but maybe they're going to do chalitza on one first, and then Yibum to the second one, which, you'll only be doing one chalitza, one Yibum, and the one that you did the chalitza, you were able to do Yibum, so that was oil Yibum to oil chalitza, and then good. So you only did chalitza one bias, and you'll build one bias too, but the problem is, you might do chalitza then Yibum. And so what's the problem? But the kamlei below yivna. The problem is, meaning if you did Yibum and chalitza, fine, but meaning it without the first interpretation. But in the second interpretation, fine. But if you did chalitza then Yibum, problem is become lebelo yivna. It says in the pasuk that he's not going to build, and then the Gemara tells elsewhere that means shuvla yivna. So you already did chalitza one, you cannot do Yibum to the second one, and then if you do Yibum, you'd be violating that isser. So therefore, that's why we don't let, even if you're doing Yibum then chalitza, even if you're doing chalitza, even if you're doing Yibum then chalitza, because meaning although that would be okay. In regards to this, to the second point, that Shelo Yomru, but then you might do Chalitza Yibum, which will run into the problem, the Isser of Liyivna. So the Gemara says, okay, but the Imam maybe say, maybe you should understand the pasuk when there's only one wife, which is Bayis Echad, maybe then Tiskay Mitzvah Yibum, maybe that you show in the pasuk, only then you can do Mitzvah Yibum. Kikatartu, when there's two co-wives, Lo Tiskay Mitzvah Yibum, because it says the terminology of singularity, which would sound like only when there's one bias. When there's more than one wife, maybe then there's no Mitzvah Yibum at all. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Torah Seber Das Rachmana. So when the Torah tells you, which we opened up the Masechta with this idea that the co-wife of an erva, if let's say one of the wives is his daughter or his mother-in-law, whatever it is, that then the co-wife, the Das Rachmana, the Torah says forbidden. Lamali, what do you need that for? Hashta beis ba'alma. If you tell me in general, whenever there's a co-wife, when there's two wives, Amrit la b'nei chalitza b'yibum, then you say that you're saying the way you want to interpret the pasuk, there's no yibum chalitza. So Tzaras Erva, do I need to tell you when she's a co-wife of an erva for sure that she's not going to be? Obviously, in the fact that we need to meet up Tzaras Erva, that regular two wives would be valid for yibum chalitza. Sh'tikmar says no. Allah malay, why not? In other words, that maybe I could tell you in general when there's two co-wives, what's called shtei batim, they would be both exempt, because only when there's one bias, when there's only one wife. And you think I wouldn't need to make it usher by Tzaras Erva? But Itzrach, no, you would need it. Because you would have thought to say actually the opposite. Erva, the Erva, let's say the daughter of this man, of the Yavam, Avroid Kami, is on the outside. It's not even falling for him. So therefore, actually, there's only one, it's the co-wife, that's Bayis Echad, that's actually falling for him. And actually, contrarily, but this Yavim Tzarasa, I would actually think that then in that situation, you'd be allowed to do Yim Tzar. Kamash Nasir, that's why I needed Tzaras every time that you can. But I can still interpret that whenever you have two women falling, that actually there's no mitzvah Yim at all. So El Rada says, you're right, the Raya is not from because of Tzaras Erva, but rather because Yevimta, the Rebbe says more than one time the word Yevimta, to tell you that even when there's more than one Yevama, there's going to be mitzvah of Yibam, but of course we're saying that you only do the Yibam Chalitza on one of them and not to both of them. Now he said in the Mishnah, he said, Achas Keshera. If one of them was kosher, meaning that she's not a grusha, and the other one was psula, then you'll do the chalitza to the psula one. Which on Rabbi Yisrael says, Kanshan Rebbe, from here's where Rebbe, in other words, in this mission, Rebbe taught us, a person not pour out the water of his pit, and others needed, where, although you don't need it, you're spilling it out, anyways you're doing chalitza. Don't do it to one that someone not a kohen will be losing an option of marrying a woman who's not a grusha, which would be an option for him, and now you're making her into chalutza, which he's not able to marry, which actually goes into the halacha of the next Mishnah, continuing with this theme about a chalutza, her status in halacha. So the Mishnah puts together three different types of women, which are all along the same theme of divorce. If someone takes back the woman that he divorced after she had already married someone else, which is forbidden. A man could remarry the woman he divorced only up until she remarries someone else. Let's say he violates that halacha and he remarries her. Or someone marries the woman he did chalitza to, which that's also a violation of layivna, which is once you didn't build, you can't build it anymore. And he did. He violated that. Although he gave a chalitza, he regrets it. He remarries her. Or third case, if someone marries the relative of the woman he did chalitza to, which chalitza on some level is like a woman that he divorced, and it's like a woman that you were married to, and therefore you're forbidden to her relatives too. So any one of these three forbidden relationships, halacha is yoitzi, you have to divorce that woman. Vavad mamzer, the child from that union is going to be illegitimate child. That's Dibri Rebbe Kiva. Which Gemara later on is going to ask, what do you mean? Krebes chalutzasai is not a biblical halacha. The halacha of a chalutza, one's not allowed to marry her because of layivna, but her relatives, we don't say. It's only rabbinically that we consider her like a divorcee. So how could the child be a mamzer? But that's what Rebbe Kiva says. They disagree. They say, no, ain't vlad mamzer. The child's not going to be a mamzer. But they do agree in the case of b'neisei krebes gerushasai. If someone marries, meaning if someone marries the relative of the woman he divorced, which that's the Gemara is going to later on ask, meaning if we're saying, but Rabbi Kiva had said that he holds that there is a mamzer from Chiyav Alavan. So therefore, he holds that those women are going to be considered as mamzerim, the children be mamzerim, and we said kreves chalitza, so we have to explain that. But the Chum agree by when they say kreves kedusha, let's say a woman that he divorced was his wife, so her sister or mother, their chiva creases. So then they agree shavlan mamzer, the child's going to be mamzer, because that's not chiv alavan, that's going to be a chiv of creases, which obviously he was divorced. He was married to. But the Gemara asked the question that we alluded to before. So Kiva holds if someone marries the relative of his chalutza, that Yevamot that he did chalitza to, her mother, if he marries her, blood mamzer doesn't mean mamzer. But Amr Shlokar says, and we quoted this already on Daf Memam Beis, that regarding a previous Mishnah, Kanshan Rebbe. Here Rebbe taught that there's a difference. Although we always put it together, the prohibition of Gerusha and Chalitza together, that they're different. Achais Gerusha, the retire. The sister of a divorced woman, meaning his wife that he divorced, her sister, is biblical because even after divorce, those relationships are still forbidden. Achais chalutzim, they were saying, but the sister of a chalutz is only rabbinic. So how can you say that the relative of that chalutza, like a sister, that the child's going to be a mamzer if it's only rabbinic? You don't create a mamzer from rabbinic prohibition. So the Gemara amends it. You're right. Today we should learn in the Mishnah that case number 3, was not krebes chalutzasai, rather krebes gerushasai, the relative of the woman he divorced, which Rashi says, and obviously then the Rabbanan only disagreeing on 2 of the cases, which is by Machzeh Gerushasai, when he marries himself the woman he divorced, that child's going to be a mamzer. And if someone marries his chalutza, that's where they would disagree. Those are Chibal Avin. Kiva holds Chibal Avin would create a mamzer. Rabban hold not. But Krebes Gerushasai, they don't disagree, as the Gemara actually points out. It's actually logical to amend it and to say that we're not marrying Krebes Chalutzasai, it means Krebes Gerushasai. Because the Ketani say that the next words in the Mishnah are, Nacham they disagree, but in Maidim we said that they agree, but Neise Krebes Gerushasai Shavalad Mams. They agree by the relative of the Gerusha that then, because that's a Chibah Krisis, that those relationships, that the child's going to be a mamzer. So the Gemara explains. But if you say Rabbi Kiva was talking about that, it was case number 3, and that's where the Rabban, it says by their opinion, that they agree in their case. If you say he wasn't talking about it, what are they agreeing to if he himself wasn't talking about it? So the Gemara rejects the Raya and says, no, but maybe what the Mishnah is coming to tell us in the opinion of the Chachamim is the yesh mamzer mechiva krisis. In other words, although the Rabban disagree in Rabbi Kiva with all his cases of mechiva lavin, they agree, but mechiva krisis, if that would be a severe type of erva, that the child would be a mamzer. So it's not a raya that Rabbi Kiva was talking about. It's just saying that although they're disagreeing regarding mechiva lavin, they agree with mechiva krisis. But says the Gemara, we don't need that for our Mishnah to tell us that, because that's a Mishnah later on that tells us this is not Mem Tesem and Aleph. Mishnah says, mamzer. What creates a mamzer? So the first opinion says, kol she'er basa, any relative, shubal yavai, that has a negative prohibition, is there Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva holds that would also create chiv lavin. He says, kol she'chayav love cars b'deishamayim, anything that one would do would be liable for punishment of cars from heaven. That creates a child's mamzer, and says the Mishnah Malach is like his opinion. So we already know that they agree by chiv krisis from that Mishnah. Why would we need our Mishnah to tell us that? So I think about maybe the Tana, we wanted anonymous halacha, which Tais discussed, that seems to be stama b'chkach machlekes, but it's still telling us like Rabbanan versus a Yachid. Maybe we want to say anonymously like that halacha, like that opinion of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. We know that he disagrees, but we wanted to say anonymously like the Chachamim over here in our Mishnah to tell us that the halacha is like that. Says the Gemara, if that would be the case, then listen to Shachri v'Krisis. Then say any other liability of cars. Why specifically are you talking about a case of the relative of his divorced wife? Obviously that we were talking about it, and therefore that's like what we're saying. That Rabbi Kiva, of course, he wasn't saying that Krevis Cholutzas is going to create a mamzer. It's rabbinic. It was talking about Krevis Gurushas, and that's the proof, because even if you tell me that we're coming to tell us that they agree by Chiba Krisis, why are you picking specifically this case? Obviously, because that's what Rabbi Kiva was talking about. The Gemara rejects that too. It says, no, but maybe Rabbi Kiva was not talking about that. And then you're asking, so okay, say pick any other Chiba Krisis. Yeah, but I did the Tana. Since the 3 cases Rabbi Kiva was talking about was Machzi Gurushasai, remarrying the woman he divorced after she married someone else. And marrying the woman he did chalitza to. And the relative of the woman that he did chalitza, and the Rabban disagree. So Tananami, when we're talking about what they agreed to, we mentioned Krevis Gurushasai, which is the relative of the woman that he divorced. But it's not necessarily Rabbi Kiva was talking about that. Could be it wasn't. Could be talking about just Chiba Krisis. But we picked a case which is similar to the other ones. So it's not a raya. So El Rada says, Gemara, you're right. We don't have any proof that Rabbi Kiva was talking about Krevis Gurushasai. Rather, Krevis Cholutzas Rabbi Kiva have a mamzer. No, it's true. Like the Gemara had originally assumed in its question. Rabbi Kiva is actually saying, if someone marries the mother of the woman that chalitza to, the child's going to be a mamzer. So Rabbi Kiva says, what's Rabbi Kiva? Didn't we say it's rabbinic? How can you create a mamzer? So no, it's because the Amakar, the pasuk says, Beis Chalutza, the house of the one who did chalitza, meaning that his shoe was taken off. Hakasav Karei Beisai. The pasuk is calling this chalutza as his house, meaning you see biblically it's like a grusha, because it's calling him his wife. And therefore it's biblical and ever, and therefore actually the child will be a mamzer, even in Krevis Chalutza, according to Rabbi Kiva. Now, relating to this, one of these cases of our Mishnah, so Amar Yosef Amar Shimber Rebbe says, everyone agrees, the Machzi Gurushasai, by the woman that he divorced, that he remarried, which is negative prohibition. It's one of those cases that we had machlekes in the Mishnah if the child's going to be mamzer basically chiv or not. Which Tracy points out, it's really all chiv that we're coming to say. We're just adding another chiddush, that even though, as we're going to bring the Gemara, that regarding the Machzi Gurushasai, it says he te'eva, which would tell us, but the child is not a te'eva, but that would still make, as the halach is coming to tell us, that the child would be pogum, would be deficient. So everyone agrees, by Machzi Gurushasai, we'll see who's everyone in a second, but as we continue to the days, Shavlad Pogum LeKahuna, that the child's going to be considered deficient for kahuna, meaning if, let's say, she gives birth to a daughter, that daughter is going to be invalid to a kohen, like a chalala. Chalala is not the someone that's forbidden to marry a Jew, but they're forbidden to marry kahanim. So too over here, this child, from this man who remarried the woman he divorced, who had been married to someone else in between, that child is going to be forbidden to kahuna. Says Gemara, who are we saying that everyone agrees? Who's this everyone? Says Gemara, Shimna Timni. We're saying Shimna Timni would agree, who we just quoted before. That is, although he says in mamzer b'chibel avin, that there's no mamzer from chibel avin, which we'll see at a later Mishnah, and he disagrees with Rabbi Kiva, which we were saying was the anonymous opinion of our Mishnah. Nehida mamzer lehava. Although that the child's not going to be a mamzer, pogum miyahava. So it's not going to be a mamzer because not chibel krisis, but the child will be pogum, will be considered deficient, which means to say like a halala, forbidden to kana. How do we know this? It's a kabbalah from Amana, which is just like when a widow marries a Kohen Gadol, which it's not a global prohibition of Amana. It's only specifically with Kohen Gadol. He's the only one who cannot marry an Amana. Yet b'napagum, her child is going to be deficient, creates a halala. So this prohibition, which is global, everyone is forbidden to remarry the woman that they had divorced, who had married someone else in between. In addition to b'napagum, isn't that a kabbalah that the child is going to be considered deficient, like a halala, and forbidden to count? That's the kabbalah, and that's what we're saying. Everyone would agree, even Shimna Timni, that the child would be pogum, even though it's not going to be a mams. So the Gemara has three questions. First of all, you could ask, Malamana, wait a second, what are you comparing to learn out from the kabbalah from a widow? She herself becomes a halala. Meaning, if let's say, subsequently, her husband, the Kohen Gadol, who married this forbidden widow, dies, she's been forbidden even to a Kohen Hedjed, where although she was never divorced, so she should be permitted to a Kohen Hedjed, she was just widowed, she's been forbidden to Kohen Hedjed. Because by the Kohen Gadol being intimate with her, he makes his wife, which is usually by the child, he makes his wife into halala. The reason for that is because it says Mikra Chavav lo yichal zarai. It doesn't say lo yachal in the singular. It says lo yichalel or the extra lamed. Sounds like there's two chilulim, there's two desecrations happening over here. One's for the wife and one's for the child, as the Gemara explains the Kedushin of Ayin Zaman Alf. Or another application is, if let's say she's a Bas Kohen, which she now, from the Kohen Gadol, even though let's say he dies without any children and she goes back to her father's household, no, she'd be invalidated from Truma, as the Gemara says later in Daf Samaches Amid Alf. Now, in contrast, by Mazig Yerushasai, when you're trying to learn the Kabbalah over there, she herself does not become mischalelas from coming back to her original husband, because if it's regarding invalidating her to Kohen, she's not becoming invalidated now when she's coming back to her original husband. She already was invalidated already when she got divorced, which a grusha is forbidden to a Kohen. And if it's regarding Truma, let's say Bas Kohen, she actually does not become forbidden by remarrying her first husband. As the Gemara says later on in the Samach Tezim Alf, has to be a certain type of person that was always forbidden to her, which is not the case by her original husband. So how you proving? There's no kabbalah almana because almana herself she becomes a halala. Machzir Gerushazi, she herself does not become a halala. But question number two is, by Machzir Gerushazi, by this halacha, by this prohibition of remarrying his ex-wife, the pasuk says he to'ever. She's an abomination. That's what it says. Which, if it's saying her, it's actually telling us ve'im baneo to'even, and that her children are not an abomination. So actually, it's telling us that the children are not becoming halal. But question number three is Tanya in the Brayso, if someone remarries the woman he divorced after she had been married to someone else, or someone marries the woman that he had done chalitza to, or if he marries the relative of his chalitza, these are the three cases we mentioned in our Mishnah. Kivam, he says, as we quote him, but here we quote him in a few different contexts. First of all, he's not considered halachically married to this woman, because Rabbi Kiva holds kedushin is not taivus, does not take effect by chival avin where there's negative prohibition. Also, therefore, she doesn't need a get from him because they're not considered halachically married. Moreover, psula. This woman now is invalid to a kohen because she's a zayna. She had an immoral, out of wedlock relation with a man, which makes her into a zayna, which would have been into a kohen. And also, uvla the apostle. Her child is also invalid because, according to Bekiva, not only apostle, it's actually a mamzer because he holds his mamzer from Chibal Avin. And because of this light, we force him to remove this woman. That's Rabbi Kiva. The sages say, Yesh leba kedushin, not true, it's Chibal Avin, the kedushin does take effect, and therefore, v'trichim in the get, she needs a divorce document from him. And v'hiksheri, she does not become a zoyna, because she was considered married, she's kosher to a kain. Uvla the kosher, and her child is also kosher. Says the Gemara Laman. To whom are you saying that the child is going to be kosher? Lav l'kuhuna? Isn't it saying that the child is even going to be kosher to kahanim? So you see that one of the cases which is hamachzi gerushasai, the child's going to be kosher, not like you wanted to say that even Shimna Timni agrees that bechiva lavin, like by machzi gerushasai, that's going to be asar for kahanim, it's going to be considered as pagum l'kuhuna, and you see not like that? That's the third question. So the Gemara starts undoing the questions, first from the last question, number 3. Loi, not true. When we're saying the child is kosher, it means l'kahal, because yes, Shimna Timni, the Chum, they hold that the child's not a mamzer. So they're allowed to marry any regular Yisrael, but forbidden to a kohen, and yes, that's because of a kavach of almana. Says Gemara, wait a second. If that's the case, then when you say he kasher, when you say there was two things you said kasher that the Chum hold, the mother and the child. You're saying when the child is kasher, you're saying that's not tikkun. That's only for the kehillah. But then when you say he kasher, the mother is kasher. Laman, who is that for? If you're saying it's for a regular Jewish man, like you're saying for the child, well, pshita, obviously, because you think a woman has nus, if l'kol that makes her forbidden to a regular Jew, that doesn't make her forbidden to a regular Jew. Elav, rather, obviously, l'kuhuna, because as a zayna now, she's forbidden to a kohen. Umedehila kahuna, and from the fact that we're saying that who she's kosher to is for kahuna, obviously below the nama kahuna, then the child also saying it's kosher, it also must be going for kahuna. So again, we're back to the question that refutes what we're saying, that Shimon Tamim would agree that the child's pagam kahuna. So the Gemara, no, midiri, is that a raya? Hakadisa, vakadisa. When we're saying she's kosher, we mean she's kosher even to kahuna. When we say the child's kosher, it's only to come to the kahal, but for kahanim, the child's going to be pagam, because like we said, from the kavachim of alamana. And the Gemara says, Hachanam Mestaber. It's logical, like we're answering question number 3. The Hakadisa, Vakadisa, that they're different. When we're saying the mother's kasha and the child's kasha, but different things. Mother's kasha in kahuna, child's kasha only for the gela. Because it's only Reisha. We learned Reisha meaning the first opinion, that of Rabbi Kiva. We were just discussing the opinion of Chab. Rabbi Kiva quoted the opposite. He says, no, he psula vlad apostle. The mother is puzzle and the child's puzzle. He's more severe in his interpretation of Chiv Alav. Now, when we say he psula, when we say the mother's puzzle, Laman, who's that for? Ilim l'kol, everything to say it's for the kila. Shem dezan, you think because even mazan, ibsalam l'kol, you think a woman cannot marry any Jew anymore? No, it's not the case. Elav l'kuna. Rabbi Kiva holds that it wasn't a marriage, and therefore it's out of wedlock relation, and therefore she's a zayin, which is forbidden for a kohen. A kohen cannot marry a zayin. Okay, so the mother is puzzle. That means for kuna. Now, uvlad the puzzle amount. When we say the child is puzzle according to Rabbi Kiva, who's that for? Ilim l'kuna, everything it means for kuna. Well. So what are you saying? Halakal kosher, but for the Gila, Rabbi Kiva holds that the child's kosher. But Ha'amay Rabbi Kiva, as we quote him already, he says that the child of a Chiv Alav and Havlad Mamzer, the child's a Mamzer, which Elapshita, obviously, when a child we're saying is puzzle, is like Kahal, for the Gila. So you see already in Rabbi Kiva, as we just proved, that discrepancy, that when the mother is going to be puzzle, it's only for Kahuna. And we're saying the child is puzzle, is even for the Kehila. Oh, so in the fact that you see from the beginning of this teaching, meaning from Kiva, Hakadisa, Bakadisa, when we're saying the mother is puzzle and the child is puzzle, it's for different things. So Seva Nami, the Seva also, according to Chacham, Hakadisa, Bakadisa, it could also be talking about different things. And if we resolve question number 3, that no, it's not a raya. Could be the child's going to be pug kahuna, and when we're saying the child is kosher, it's only for the kehila. When we're saying the mother's kosher, it's for kahuna. And what's your question number 2? So we took care of question number 3. Question number 2 of Hite Benami. Also that you said, wait a second, the pasuk says she's an abomination, the Machzik Shasik, which tells us that the child is not an abomination. No, don't make such a dig, don't make such an inference. Rather, Hite, when I'm saying she's an abomination, means but her co-wife, when there's a situation of Yibum, we're not going to say that the co-wife is forbidden for Yibum like as if she's a Tzaras Erva, although the Machzik Shasik is forbidden, but we're going to say that the Tzara is not an abomination. I could say the child is an abomination, meaning, and we resolve question number 2, could be the bana is pagim l'kuna. So it's not a raya ein b'nei teva. No, it's in tzarasa teva, but the banim are teva. So ela but says the Gemara, you took care of question number 3 and question number 2. But almana, question number 1, regarding the kabel chamer from the widow, that's kasha, that's difficult because we said it's not a kabel chamer. You're saying kabel chamer, you said alman l'kan golda is not even a global isser, and still the child's going to be pogum for sure. Here it's a global isser. Child's going to be considered pogum for kuna. That's not true because malamana. What do we find by the widow? She herself becomes a chalalas. So you see, it's very severe the impact on her. So maybe that's where the bana is going to be pogum. But who said by Machzik Shasa where she herself does not become a chalala? Maybe the child's not going to be a pogum. So rather the Gemara falls off how we were interpreting the halacha and says, even if you're going to say how teaching, hachid, this is how it says. It's actually referring to something else. I'm going to use it when Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, everyone agrees regarding a different halacha. Not when it's regarding a Machzik Shasa, which is a chiva lavin. Rather, a Baal chiva krisis. When he has a relationship with someone that's punishable for koris, that's what we're going to say, shavlad pagum, the child's going to be pagum. And mana kol moed, then based on this halacha, the new interpreted halacha, who's everyone agrees, it's Rabbi Yeshua, which is, because in the previous halacha, it was Shemna Timni, because we're talking about that it was Tomah Chiva Lavin, which, the child's not a mamzer, according to Shemna Timni, but we're saying it's going to be, we want to say it's B'nam Pagum. Now we're talking about Chiva Krisis, and who's agreeing that the child's going to be Pagum is Rabbi Yeshua, the Avgav, the Meshua, although Rabbi Yeshua says in the Mishnah later on, Daf Yomi Aleph, a mamzer Mechiva Krisis, he's more lenient. He holds, no, a child's not a mamzer, even from a punishment of a karis, has to be Chiv Mises. So that's what this teaching of Rabbi Yosef is saying. Nehida mamzer how you're right, although according to him the child's not going to be a mamzer, but pogam mehava. It's going to be at least deficient, where it's forbidden to kahuna. And that's mekavach mamona. Because a mom on the Kohen Gadol, if we find by a widow married to Kohen Gadol, the Sheni Shiur Shabakol, it's not a global list, so it's only to Kohen Gadol. Still b'na pogam, the child's going to be deficient to Kuna. So Zushi Shiur Shabakol. So this woman who is a chiva creases, who is a global list, forbidden to everyone, in the danger of b'na pogam isn't a kamachem, although it's not going to be a mamzer, the child's going to be forbidden to Kuna. And the Chita may begin to say, like we said in the first version, Malamon, but what? What are you learning from a widow Shekin Yasma Mischalas, where she becomes desecrated herself? Maybe that's when b'na pogam, well, hachanam here also. If you told Machiva creases, Kimin Sheba'ala, once this man has relations with this woman, Asa Zaina, he makes her into a Zaina, and she's invalid for kahuna. Meaning, in contrast, as Rashi says, by Masli Gerushase, we couldn't have said the same thing, because the Gemara in Perkamal later in the Samach Tesman says, when we say, who's a Nivala Lapasala? If a woman has, let's say a Bas Kohen has relations with someone that's forbidden to her, where the halacha is, then she becomes puzzled for Truma. The Gemara says, maybe says Toma Machzik Gerushase. The Gemara says, no, because it has to be someone that was always forbidden to her, always foreign, azar esla meikara, which not the case by Machzik Gerushase. This was her first husband. She was obviously forbidden him at one point. She only forbidden it's him now. So that would not make the woman into halala. It only makes her the halala with someone that was always forbidden, which a chiva krisis was always forbidden to her. Therefore, that's what we're saying, that yes, it would make her into a Zaina, and therefore she is becoming on some level mischaleles, and therefore we could say Kavachem from Almana, which is not even a Shiur Shabakol, that the Benas Pagam, so to over here, by the Chiva Krisis, that even Rabbi Shua, who holds it's not going to be Mamza, is going to be agreeing that it's going to be Benah Pagam.